Donald Trump has escalated trade tensions with China, warning that the US could impose a 200% tariff on rare earth magnets if Beijing does not increase supply to American industries. Speaking from the White House, Trump told reporters that China has to give us magnets, adding that otherwise the US would have to charge a 200% tariff or something.
President Trump has just thrown the global economy into turmoil with a threat that few saw coming: 200% tariffs on Chinese rare earth magnets if Beijing dares to curb exports to the United States. This is not just another trade headline, it's a direct strike at the backbone of modern technology. Rare earth magnets are essential for electric vehicles, smartphones, medical devices, fighter jets, and even critical infrastructure like power grids and satellites. Without them, the US economy, and much of the world, would grind to a halt. By targeting this single choke point, Trump is weaponizing trade in a way that instantly reverberates from Silicon Valley to Detroit, from Wall Street to defense contractors. This move is not about symbolic tariffs on consumer goods like shoes or furniture, it's about controlling the flow of materials that literally power the future. China currently dominates more than 90% of the world's rare earth magnet supply, and by threatening to weaponize its monopoly, Beijing exposed one of America's greatest vulnerabilities. Trump's response, an unprecedented 200% tariff threat, signals that the US is not only aware of this weakness but is prepared to fight back with overwhelming force. For businesses, investors, and policymakers, the implications are staggering. This isn't just a trade skirmish, it's a potential turning point in the global balance of economic power, one that could reshape industries, disrupt supply chains, and redefine US-China relations for years to come. To understand the gravity of Trump's 200% tariff threat, you have to understand what's at stake. Rare earth magnets are not just another commodity, they are the hidden foundation of the modern economy. These small but powerful components are the heart of everything from Tesla's electric motors to Apple's iPhones, from MRI machines in hospitals to the precision-guided missiles that keep America's military dominant. They are irreplaceable, difficult to produce, and concentrated almost entirely in one country, China. For decades, Beijing has carefully cultivated its monopoly, controlling not only the mining but also the processing and refining stages that make rare earth elements usable at scale. Today, China accounts for over 90% of global production, giving it a stranglehold on industries worth trillions of dollars. If China restricts exports, the US would immediately face shortages, forcing companies to shut down production lines, delay shipments, and pay skyrocketing prices. This is why Trump's tariff threat is so explosive. It directly challenges the one area where China has unmatched leverage. At 200%, these tariffs are not symbolic. They are designed to make Chinese exports economically unviable, forcing US companies and allies to diversify supply chains and invest in domestic production. Trump is sending two clear messages: to Beijing, that the US will not tolerate weaponized trade blackmail, and to American industry, that reliance on China must end now. For businesses, the costs could be immediate: shortages, delays, and higher prices. But for Washington, this fight is about long-term survival in a world where supply chains have become battlegrounds. The question is not just whether Trump can withstand the short-term pain of such a tariff war, but whether the US can finally break free from decades of dependence on a single foreign supplier. If the answer is yes, Trump may have just set in motion one of the most consequential economic rebalancing acts of the 21st century. If Trump follows through on a 200% tariff against Chinese rare earth magnets, the immediate impact will be felt across nearly every corner of the US economy. Automakers, already struggling with high costs and supply shortages, would be hit first. Electric vehicle production relies heavily on neodymium and dysprosium magnets from China, and without them, assembly lines in Detroit and California could grind to a halt. Consumer electronics giants like Apple, which depend on rare earth magnets for speakers, cameras, and haptic feedback systems, would face supply shortages that ripple directly to consumers, driving up prices for everything from iPhones to laptops. In the defense sector, the stakes are even higher. Fighter jets, missile guidance systems, submarines, and radar installations all require rare earth magnets. Any disruption would weaken US military readiness at a time of rising global tensions. But the ripple effects would not stop at America's borders. Allies like Japan and the European Union, who also rely heavily on Chinese rare earth exports, would be forced into the same crisis, potentially fracturing the Western alliance if nations scramble to secure limited supplies for themselves. On Wall Street, markets would not wait for factories to shut down, investors would react instantly, driving up commodity prices, punishing companies most exposed to China, and triggering volatility across tech, auto, and defense stocks. For everyday Americans, the effects would be visible in higher prices, slower delivery times, and job losses in industries that can't adapt fast enough. What Trump is signaling with this threat is that short-term pain is worth the long-term prize, breaking China's chokehold on a critical supply chain. But the gamble is massive. If companies cannot find alternatives quickly, the US risks a self-inflicted shockwave that could stall its own economy even as it tries to weaken Beijing. Beijing is not likely to sit quietly in the face of Trump's 200% tariff threat. If history is any guide, China will respond strategically and selectively, targeting US industries that are both politically sensitive and economically vulnerable. During past trade wars, Beijing went after American farmers, striking at soybeans, pork, and corn, key exports from Trump-supporting states in the Midwest. This time, the retaliation could be even sharper. China might impose its own tariffs or outright export bans on other rare earth materials, deepening America's supply chain crisis. It could also strike at US companies operating inside China, from Tesla's Gigafactory in Shanghai to Apple's manufacturing ecosystem, by creating regulatory hurdles, stalling approvals, or even encouraging boycotts of American brands. Beyond trade, Beijing could weaponize its control of manufacturing networks that supply critical components to US firms, further squeezing industries already under pressure. But perhaps the most dangerous counterpunch would be financial. China remains one of the largest holders of US Treasury bonds. While a full-scale sell-off would hurt Beijing as well, even the threat of reducing purchases could send shockwaves through American debt markets, spiking borrowing costs for Washington at a time of record deficits. In other words, Trump's tariff threat doesn't just test China's rare earth monopoly, it risks provoking a broader economic war where Beijing has multiple levers to hit back hard. For Trump, the calculation is clear: show strength and deter China before it escalates. For Beijing, the choice is equally stark: defend its dominance or risk losing its most powerful trade weapon. The collision course is set, and neither side looks ready to blink. For Trump, this tariff threat is more than an economic policy, it is a political weapon designed to reinforce his core message of America first, and reassert his brand as the only leader tough enough to confront China. Throughout his presidency and beyond, Trump has framed Beijing as both an economic rival and a national security threat, knowing that this stance resonates with voters across party lines. By targeting rare earth magnets, Trump isn't just fighting over trade, he is highlighting America's dependence on China in a way that feels immediate and dangerous to ordinary citizens. He can point to the fact that US fighter jets, smartphones, and even medical equipment rely on Chinese exports, and then argue that only he has the courage to end that reliance. This narrative allows Trump to transform a complex supply chain issue into a simple message: America is vulnerable, China is exploiting us, and strong leadership is the only answer. Politically, it's a masterstroke. It rallies his base, pressures Democrats to respond, and puts Biden, or any political rival, on defense, forced to explain why the US allowed such a critical dependency to form in the first place. Beyond the campaign trail, the tariff threat also serves as a rallying cry for American industry. Trump is signaling to manufacturers, miners, and defense contractors that he will fight to create a domestic rare earth industry, even if it means short-term pain. This message appeals to swing states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, where blue-collar workers have seen firsthand the consequences of outsourcing and globalization. By positioning himself as the one leader willing to endure economic turbulence in order to protect America's long-term future, Trump is turning the rare earth crisis into a political weapon. Longer term, if these tariffs succeed in spurring domestic investment and reshoring production, Trump could claim victory not only at the ballot box but also in rewriting America's economic strategy for decades to come. In his view, this is not just about magnets, it's about national pride, sovereignty, and the survival of U.S. power in a world where economic leverage is as important as military might. At its core, Trump's 200% tariff threat against Chinese rare earth magnets is not just about trade, it is about who controls the future of the global economy. Rare earths are the building blocks of modern technology, and whoever controls their supply chain controls the pace of innovation, the strength of national security, and the direction of global power. For decades, the world tolerated China's dominance because it was convenient and cheap. Now, that convenience has turned into vulnerability. Trump's move signals a turning point where the U.S. is willing to absorb short-term economic pain in order to build long-term independence from Beijing. But this confrontation doesn't end at America's borders. Europe, Japan, South Korea, and Canada, all heavily reliant on Chinese exports, will be forced to take sides, reshaping alliances and creating new fractures in the global trading system. If the U.S. succeeds, it could ignite a wave of investment in rare earth mining, processing, and manufacturing across North America and allied nations, reducing China's grip and creating a new era of technological resilience. If it fails, however, the cost could be devastating, crippling industries, fracturing supply chains, and handing Beijing even more leverage over the West. In this sense, Trump's tariff threat is more than an economic gamble, it is a test of whether America and its allies can finally break free from decades of dependency or whether they will remain hostage to a single nation's control. The battle over rare earth magnets may seem technical, but it is, in reality, a battle over power, sovereignty, and the very structure of the global economy in the 21st century.